Okay, the next order of business is the fiscal year 2018 tax classification. Board to discuss classification and taxation of all property within the town. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we do every year and consistent with the Board of Selectmen's tax policy, we targeted developing a budget last year. And the thing we always have to remind ourselves of, just today we're setting a rate to fund last year's budget of 3.6 to 3.8% increase in the average tax bill as a general range. As I had said at several tri-board meetings last year, this year was going to be a bit of an anomaly because what happened was part of our MSBA reimbursement went away. However, the debt service associated with the project remained. So we essentially are exempt debt increase by approximately $450,000, which drives the average increase. This is something that's going on across the Commonwealth to the point the MSBA has completely rewritten their funding policy, how we do it now and how we'll do it moving forward. Not just Andover, but every municipality in Massachusetts is that we borrow our share, they borrow their share, we retire our debt as they retire theirs, and they're entirely independent because this reimbursement schedules and the debt schedules don't always line up. So David Biller is going to walk you through this, as he does every year.
So that will inflate the percentage, but in some ways also. Correct.
Correct. I mean, if we put that out, we'd be in the 3.6, 3.8 range.
Is it going to increase the taxes?
It's going to increase the taxes.
So, more important to our earlier discussion as far as the budget next year.
No, I couldn't agree more. This is something we saw coming. I think it's going to be the last time, Donna, that this happens in Andover because we're now under a completely new funding model from the MSBA, but we saw it coming, we knew it was coming, and we set the operating budget based on the 3.6 to 3.8%, but like I said, we have this one-year anomaly, so there'll be, this is first reading, some discussion with regard to how to mitigate that increase with regard to the shift. So David, by all means.
Thank you. I do have 10 copies of the presentation, so if anybody wants them, they're here to have. If for some reason you don't have one of these and you want one, I'll just send me an email. I'll give it to you. So thank you. As Andrew said, I'm Dave Billard. I'm the Chief Assessor for the town, and on behalf of the Board of Assessors, I'll be walking you through the classification. And the whole intent and purpose of my being here is to provide the selectmen with enough information as they may need to basically vote on the annual classification issues. And the first is the vote of a residential factor, basically determining the tax rates for the year. The second is the vote of an open space discount. Third is the vote of a residential exemption. And the fourth is the vote of a commercial exemption. And so before we get into each one of these, what I usually like to preface this whole presentation with is basically a look to see what happened to values in the town from one year to the next. So let's look at the value changes from 17 to 18. All the residential property in 17 is $6.1 billion, and in 18 it's $6.34 billion, which is just over a 2.5% increase. Open space went from 7.2 million to 7.256, just 0.17% increase. Commercial went from 577.4 million to 588.2 million. 1.9% increase. Industrial went from 601.6 to 608 million, a 1.06% increase. And personal property, the only class that actually went down from 294.6 million to 255 million, a 13% decrease. Over the years, personal property has really kind of been our lion's share of good growth for the community. And I knew it was gonna taper off, and this is the year it tapered off.
And to put into perspective, when 2 years ago, we had really historic growth at just under 2.6 million. 1.9 million of that new growth was in fact personal property. So,
Personal property, to define that?
David, do you want to give the official definition of personal property?
Personal property would be machinery and equipment used in the conduct of business, and, you know.
Right, it's business, it's not, it's not residential.
Exactly.
This is investments that companies make in tools and equipment. things like that.
Exactly.
Like the Snyder leather boom was a couple, not leather, sorry. Snyder. Yeah, no, electric.
State himself.
And the tannery,
A couple of years, I
tannery.
know. That was a couple of years ago, so.
Yeah.
You know, big boom there.
Peggy Cruz, 145 Regular Road. How is the estimate for value done? How do you estimate that this went up 2.53%?
Well, for 17 is that's been spent, right? And 18 has been, 18 are the certified values for 18. And so these two columns are actually certified values for the year
By whom?
by the Department of Revenue.
State. The state.
Exactly. Yep. And so aggregately, last year we had 7.6 billion in value. This year we have 7.79, up 1.75%. And so for the residential factor, or having a look at the tax rate scenarios that we could adopt for the year, we take this new 7.7 billion. The levy amount for the town for fiscal year 18 is 139,827,283. If we just divide the levy by the value times 1,000, gives us an unadjusted rate for fiscal year 18, 1793. And if we divide those town values that we just saw into the different classes of residential, open space, commercial, and industrial, and aggregate them as they would be split, the residential share of the town for this year is 81.4%, and the CIP is 18.6%. So if we take that unadjusted rate of 1793, residential and commercial, and we increase by classification shifts the CIP rate in 15% increments, what this slide shows is the resulting tax rates from the unadjusted 1793 to the maximum shift that could be adopted at the 175. And as you see, for every 15% increase to the CIP rate, the residential rate decreases by about 3.5%.
Did we, David, have we
Yep.
used the CIP rate, the same scale last year as well? The CIP rate?
Right, I think last year I may have, yeah, I think it was 15%,
Okay.
15% increments.
And the maximum is 175?
That's right.
Was there something that allowed us to go over where we were before, a couple of years
Right,
ago?
right. It was, you know, when the DOR issues all of these guidelines in adherence to Prop 2.5 and all the rest of it, one of the things that they check on is the maximum split that you can adopt.
Right.
And I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, was the first year that we could go
Right.
to the 175. You're 100% correct, from the maximum 150.
150, right.
Exactly.
2 years ago. Yeah.
Right,
2 years ago, yeah.
there you go. And so if you take a look at this broad spectrum of tax rates and look at past few years where we've wound up, we've been in right around the 150 split.
Right.
Okay? And what this kind of shows is with every 1% increase in the rate, the residential taxpayer saves about 1/4% on the tax rate.
And just to, Andrew, you mentioned this anomaly with the reimbursement. Where is that fitting into this?
Here it comes.
Okay.
Now, with all of these rate scenarios, knowing that for 18 we have new values in the town, what I typically like to do is get a benchmark of what an actual tax bill increase looking at averages would be. Okay? For 17, the average single-family tax was $9,170. The average commercial tax was $55,287, and the average industrial tax was $112,796. With the new single-family average value at $613,200, and the average commercial at $2,108,000, and the average industrial at $4,338,000, if we apply some of the rates that we just looked at a 152 split, the single-family tax increases to $9,690, which is a 5.7% increase, which is getting into the anomaly. The commercial tax increases to $57,458, which is a 3.9% increase year over year. And then the industrial tax increases to $118,231, which is a 4.8% increase. Now, all of these increases that I've provided here are year over year. And over the past few years, the board has taken a look at the 10-year average. And if you were to adopt this 152 split, how would that affect the 10-year average? The 10-year average for the single-family tax bill, inclusive of this 5.7% increase, would be 3.6%. The commercial, including this 3.9 for the past 10 years, would be a 3.3% increase, and then the industrial, 3.5. Let's look at another shift. A 152.5 shift would be a 5.5% increase for the single-family taxpayer. A 4.3% increase for the commercial taxpayer. And then a 5.2% increase for the industrial taxpayer. 10-year average. See that it hasn't changed too much because we're looking at such small percentage changes in tax bills that 0.2 and 0.4% over a 10-year period isn't really very significant. At a 153 shift, you're looking at a 5.4% single-family increase, a 4.6 commercial, and a 5.5 industrial. 10-year average changes a little bit for the industrial, 3.6. And then at a 154.
What was it last year? What was the average single-family increase? Prior year, it was...
Let's say it was 2.
It was under 3.
Yeah, 2.5, 2.6, something like that. Yeah.
And this is obviously reflective of the town budget, the budget that was passed in the
Last.
spring town meeting.
Exactly.
But this anomaly, I'm still unclear about what the significance of this anomaly is, where these rates look like they're so much
Yeah.
higher.
Well, that's just it. With the inclusion of that debt, these percentages last year were much less.
Right.
Okay, and so if you include the debt, these increases wind up being, you know, much higher.
So this is the first I'm hearing that we had this anomaly.
So it's
why
not-
is it a surprise to us that we're sitting here looking at 5%, 6% tax increases?
We talked about it at several tri-boards. It's not new debt. It's not newly incurred debt. It's debt that just no longer has an MSBA offset. Therefore, the amount we have to raise through exempt debt, so debt incurred through debt exclusions, has increased because we're.
What can we do to rectify this? I mean, do we spend less money? How can we, these are unacceptable increases as far as I'm concerned, going from under 3 to looking at something close to 6. It's just,
But this is money already spent.
This is based on an approved budget.
This is based on what
But
was
this-
approved at town meeting, and we're just gonna have to tax it in some way. So any savings would be in future years, but
yeah, but I
we're
guess-
looking to tax
This is-
basically what the town has already agreed to spend.
Fund appropriations.
Right, the question I have is how come we weren't talking about this change in the reimbursement back when we were looking at the budget last year?
We mentioned in the FinCom report, I believe.
What's the dollar amount?
We had, and the other thing is, we talked about using the tax rate as a metric, so, you know, that should have come up at that time, rather than sitting here now.
Andrew, what's the dollar amount we're talking about?
435,000.
And that amount shifts it,
435,000 on 137 million.
that doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
That's the delta between the 3.6, which was our target, an identified target, which we built the budget around, and this anomaly. So we would have backed out approximately $500,000 out of the budget otherwise.
Yeah, it's not,
like a small
it's not intuitive. It seems that that's a relatively small amount on $137 million that we have to tax. So it doesn't seem like it would have that much of an effect. So I guess I'm just not following that.
I'm having the same correlation.
We can, between now and the 27th, break it down for you. The way we have.
Under the levy limit. Factors into that, right?
What's that?
The under the levy limit factors
You're
into
talking about almost
that increase as
doubling the
well.
taxing.
Right.
That's another 600,000.
Right. You know, not only do we have the 400,000 for the debt, but this year we are going closer to the levy limit. Okay? Last year we had $1.3 million unused levy. This year, with the budget that was passed, we have 613,000 right around there. So that's another 600,000 that we are using versus leaving on the table. And so between these two items, we have an additional $1,135,712. 433 in debt exclusion and 692 in excess capacity that we're using. So the combination of those two is $1,135,000.
I didn't follow those numbers. Andrew, we have $300,000 of excess levy capacity, right?
Right now, we actually have almost double that. So the vote of the board was to maintain 300. Based on the budget that was approved and the certification of growth, we now have about 636, is it, David?
Yeah, 631 estimated.
Right, so we're still not taxing to the levy.
When we went into town meeting, though, we had assumed we had 300.
Correct,
Okay, so it actually ended up being better than we expected, so therefore we have about 600,
correct.
right?
But we also were building the budget using the metrics of what the increase was going to be. And that's the point that didn't get brought up, to say that it was going to be double what it was the year before. So that's, there was a policy that we adopted,
And we're still in the 10-year average of 3.6. If we had pulled out the anomaly, we'd be right back around 3.6, 3.8.
but we were at under 3 last year.
We were under 3.
So Andrew, is some of this that we're spending the, not only the unreimbursed exempt debt that you're talking about, but also that we're compounding it by spending some unused levy capacity?
So-
Assuming we're at full levy, assuming we were taxing levy capacity, right, there was no excess levy capacity, then we would roll the levy forward 2.5%, right, and you would have that
An
calculation.
easy calculation.
Right, but the facts are, we rolled it forward with a 2.5%, Prop 2.5 rolling ahead for the levy capacity, but then we also spent some unused levy capacity, right?
Correct.
Is that what's compounding this? Is it not, is it more than just the exempt debt issue?
So it's three issues. One, the 2.5% increase allowable on the Proposition 2.5. Part of what we use in unused levy. And third, in this case, approximately 500,000, just less, of the increase in exempt debt. Which again, is not new debt, it's just debt service that is no longer has an offset on the
Okay, so
revenue side.
to the extent then that we spared taxpayers being taxed to the levy capacity in past years, which created the excess levy capacity, there was some give back of that, and now that's what's compounding the growth in the property tax bills. I guess it would have, I think it's safe to say, it would be helpful to see a reconciliation
Sure.
of kind of how this got here.
Yeah. We can produce the tax recap sheet. That's
Well, also, to look at it now, after the fact, when we established the policy to look at this as the budget was being developed, it's concerning that we're sitting here now seeing these numbers for the first time. When it's been a policy of the board to look at it as it's being developed.
No, I understand. And again, August 24th, 2016, I showed a graph that showed the last year of increasing exempt debt was this year. And we're seeing it in the form of the rate.
But it didn't tie into this. We weren't talking about a potential 6% increase in residential property taxes. That's
I think
contrary to what the idea was, to use the rate of increase as the metric during the budget construction. And we're in that section now, we're in that point now for this coming year, and that's why it's so important to maintain that. So I'm disappointed that we're looking at numbers like this, and I think the reconciliation is a good idea, but to look at almost doubling the increase based on different things is disappointing at best. And I think we need to scrub these a little bit more. I don't know what we can do. Sorry.
And so with these different shift scenarios, okay, I usually provide 3 different benchmarks that most communities look at. At this 157.5 shift, which equates to a 4.1% single-family increase, a 7.7 commercial, and an 8.6 industrial. This retains the levy shares that were adopted in 17, which equates to a residential rate of 15.57 and a CIP rate of 28.24. And so, for a vote, it would be a residential factor of 86.8535. The next is a 153 shift, which would equate to a 5.4% increase for the single family, a 4.6% increase for the commercial, and then a 5.5 for the industrial. And this seems to be the most uniform increases across all the classes of property, which would equate to a residential rate of 15.76 and a CIP rate of 27.43. And so for the vote, that would be a residential factor of 87.8824. And then lastly, a 152.5 shift, which is the shift factor that was adopted last year, would be a 5.5% increase for the single, a 4.3% for the commercial, and a 5.2 for the commercial industrial. And this retains the shift that was adopted in 17 and equates to a 1578 residential rate and a 2734 CIP rate. And so for the vote, it would be a residential factor of 87.9967.
And the maximum you said, David, was 155 or 173? What was the-
175. Right.
175.
And again, these, with all the different shifts that you could potentially adopt, looking at last year's shift, most uniform increases, 10-year averages, 5-year averages, if there are other scenarios, okay, that you want to see a specific point on, you know, I can certainly provide that, because you're looking at basically from a 1 all the way to a 175. There may be some points that I haven't really covered here, so.
So we've always tried to historically keep it an equal amount across the board. as far as, you know. And you're saying that that number is the one?
Well, if you're just looking at a year-over-year
Math, yeah.
increase, you know, it's a, it seems to be, I'm gonna need to get back one.
155.
The 152.5 is 5.5, 5.2, highest for the residential. So 153 is 5.4, 4.6, and 5.5. That's
Right.
the most uniform. Well, 4.6 is considerably lower.
And then if you went to 157, you would lower the residential.
Right, really go high, the
Increase
commercial
the,
is.
the commercial.
Commercial and industrial. So, you know, you want to sacrifice business, or, you know, we have to make that balance, right? It's a balance. This is the first reading, so we should compile a list of questions and.
We can run any scenario.
Right.
The open space discount. This adoption exempts up to 25% of the value of land that is classified as open space. Open space is land not otherwise classified and land which is maintained in an open and natural condition which contributes significantly to the benefit and enjoyment of the public. These parcels classified for Andover, okay, as open space are in excess of zoning, basically rear land or land from cluster developments that were never built on. The average assessment of these 141 pieces of land is $51,461, which reflects the fact that in most instances they're unbuildable. And there's only one community that's ever adopted this, Bedford. The residential exemption. This is an exemption of up to, for this year, the statutory 35%, which changed due to the Municipal Modernization Act, of the average assessed value of all residential property, which is then applied to the assessment of a principal residence of the property owner. In 17, there were 15 communities that adopted this exemption. And out of these communities, there was either a much higher percentage of seasonal renters or a more urban setting with a much higher rental community. And adoption of this exemption with a high percentage of owner occupancy shifts tax burdens from lower value properties to higher value properties. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're exempting a fixed amount off of the value, which when you're looking at a lower value is a much higher percentage than what it is for a higher value property. And the commercial exemption. The selectmen may vote up to a 10% exemption for commercial property owners that had an average annual employment of 10 or fewer and an assessed value of less than $1 million. Increases the tax of industrial property owners and those owning commercial properties valued over $1 million, as those are the two classes that are ineligible. And 12 communities have adopted this in 17.
Other questions?
Just the only recap is that the equilibrium, the most equal increase factor is 1.5 and 5.3.
Yeah, I think it's a 1, where we had So the 5.4, a 4.6, and a 5.5.
Right, 153. And last year we were at
152.
153.
Right.
Commercial is significantly lower there, though. Almost a full percent lower.
The problem with this math is
Yeah.
that because of the three factors, you can't get equal, totally equal.
Right. We're pretty close last year, as I remember.
Oh, we did, yeah.
A lot closer than this. But why is it so much different for commercial this year than it was? It seems to be lower. The equal, we can't seem to make it as equal as we did last year. Is there any thought on
Well, you know, we did lose a little value, right, in the personal property.
that?
And so, when you look at this, one of the first slides, which is usually why I provide it, there has been, not huge, but a little bit of a change in the percentage shares, okay, of the residential to the CIP. And when you're looking at basically increasing one to save the other, even a little difference, okay, in that percentage that they both share makes a difference in the ultimate rate. And so last year, I think the residential wound up being 80. And so we picked up a little bit more, 0.6, a little more than 0.5% for the residential, and CIP lost about 0.6, a little bit more than 0.5%.
So ultimately, because of that, we won't be able to make it as even as we have in years past.
Right.
Do we have a chart that shows historically what the percent increase has been
Yeah,
for
it's in
single?
It's here.
Is it in here?
Yeah.
Where is that?
This is like second.
Is it in the memo or is it in
Second
the?
page, I think. Let's
Page 7, I think.
see. Page 7 and 8,
Page 7.
page 7 and 8, yeah. It's right here, the bottom of page 7.
And were you looking for shifts or percentage increases?
Percentage increase, just when we talked about trying to balance it out.
Okay.
In the memo on page 11,
Right, and I think on page 11 might be the best, because that gives you a breakout very similar to how it is structured,
Yeah, there it is.
with the tax bill increases for each year. All 10 years.
So the tax bill increase last year for residential was 2.51.
That's correct.
And that was the whole goal, was to keep it no higher than the 10-year, or 5 or 10-year average.
Which is approximately the 3.6. And David, if you go back to the slide,
2.4, actually, in the residential, right? So, that's why seeing this almost double is alarming. And I don't know how to, you know, we brought it up last year. I know you were aware of it. It was your second year last year, that we wanted to use that increase as a factor in developing the budget so that there was complete eyes open.
if we were to offset the exempt debt, we would have had to cut approximately $500,000 out of the budget and not raise the $600,000 in excess levy, which would have essentially zeroed out the town's increase.
But then you would have had a conversation, and that conversation didn't happen.
Well, I feel strongly that I made it clear that the exempt debt increase was going to happen, and I tried to make a point of it at every tri-board because it was a one-time thing for us, and it's happening.
Honest, Andrew, that was lost on me. If that was communicated, I didn't get that, because, you know, we get down to the final, we're talking about here taking $140 million that was approved at town meeting, and now we have to tax it, right?
Correct.
And in that process leading up to town meeting, there's all kinds of discussions about increasing the school budget and grabbing money from here and there, and I think I would have remembered if I had heard, hey, there's another, you know, exempt debt that we're going to have to absorb that's going to hit. I just don't recall. Maybe it was, but I don't recall that. But I think the real issue here is we are taxing money that has already been approved by town meeting, and so the real issue is how do we stop doing this? Otherwise, these numbers are going to get worse. And I think taking a look at that $140 million that the town meeting approved and showing how that has changed year to year and what the real drivers are, where the spending is coming from, because that is what's getting us here. It's that spending that's getting us here.
Right, but totally agree. That's why we took a policy vote a few years ago to use the rate of increase as one of those metrics, because it ties into that and it illustrates the floor or the ceiling you have to work with. And clearly that wasn't done last year. The contributing factors is the budget that gets passed that you just brought up is what feeds that. But
Well, I just want as the public listens to this, because this wasn't clear to me until I was on the board, is this exercise is basically allocating money that we've already agreed to spend. We are not raising money as a way to spend it going forward, so there's no choice, there's not a lot of choices here, other than to rearrange the chairs on the deck, right?
that's why why during the budget development.
And what's more important is we need to figure this out, and our options are going to be limited, is going forward with the next budget that we're about to enter right now, tonight with the CIP, is how do we get the amount we're taxing down or control that, because otherwise we'll be sitting here a year from now with the same exact problem.
And we took that policy vote after the 2014 when it went up to almost 5. That's when that vote was taken by the board because of that anomaly that year.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking for some numbers here. Anyone else?
I have to just say I was shocked watching this on TV. I love the term an anomaly. Obviously, at least two of you, were unaware of what was going to be presented here tonight. And I'm sorry, but Mr. Flanagan, something of this anomaly, I think, deserved a great deal of attention last year for discussion. and apparently wasn't. And we're talking a rather large tax increase to the residents. And I object to that. I watch your meeting faithfully, I try to, and I try to understand everything that is happening, and I did not hear this. And I watched the finance committee meetings, the tri-board meetings. I did not get this, and I'm very statistical, okay? That's my brain, mathematical. I don't know what can be done about it, apparently nothing. But, well, what I saw on TV was about a $570 tax increase on the average for our next taxes. And that, to me, is totally unacceptable. As far as I'm concerned, cut. Cut. Make it go down. And it looks like the residential part has to take the brunt of the tax increase. As far as I'm concerned, spread it out. I don't know how you do any of that. But this is totally unacceptable to me, especially as a senior. This hurts. It's gonna hurt a lot of seniors. And on top of that, you sat at a meeting that I watched where the school committee is talking about the high school, which is an override. We also have West Elementary, which could come up. And all that gets added on to this, am I correct? Yes. You know, but, you know, it's like, well, somehow we're gonna do all this. And I know there's a lot of people in this town that are very well off, but there are a lot of normal, average people that are not that well off, that would like to stay in this town, including myself. And I don't see us going in the right direction, and I don't care if it's just 1 year, 10 years that you're looking at. You know, I listened to your 5-year plan, I listened to this board, and, you know, I just don't know where you're heading. And I don't know where this town is heading. All I know is that we're becoming, what, you know, Taxachusetts, and to me, it's getting out of hand, and this is a prime example of it being out of hand. I just don't know how you can fix this, because you said it's money already approved, right?
That's true.
So you can't, but the town was not aware. As far as I'm concerned, I wasn't aware, and I listened, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that voted for everything that were not aware that their taxes were gonna go up this much in this coming year. So there was a big communication problem at town meeting. I don't know what else to say except it's a big disappointment. It's gonna hurt a lot of people, and it should not have happened, and it should never happen again. And if there is going to be an anomaly, that anomaly should have a great deal of exposure and discussion, which apparently it did not. You may think you mentioned it at, I don't know, finance committee meeting or whatever, but there's 2 selectmen that seem to not be aware. That is unacceptable, and I would chastise you for that as personally. So that's it. I don't know what you can do. Something needs to be done. It should not have happened, and it should not fall on the taxpayers to this extent. So if I were running my household, I'd say, well, I can't buy this year. I can't do that this year. I need a cut this year. And that's what you need to do. Thank you. Oh, no, I never stayed.
Can you pass these around with signature?
Hit me once, that's good.
David, you all set? Mr. Town Manager, or is that?
That's it for me.
Okay, so
If
this
there's
is
any
the-
scenarios you'd like run, let me know, and I'll work with David and Donna, and we'll provide them for the next meeting.
Yeah, this is the first reading of this. We won't be taking a vote this evening. Yep.
Always any comments? Good evening, my name is Mike Bevilacqua. I'm the Assistant Vice President and Economic Development Director for the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight representing the Andover Chamber of Commerce, which is a division of the Merrimack Valley Chamber. We work closely with the town manager and all of you on economic development issues here in Andover. And as you know, taxes in effect on businesses and residents alike. We sent a letter out. Do you want to read that letter, or do you already have that on file?
The letter's on file if the board would.
It was sent to us, right?
Oh, yes. And I just hope you can consider lowering business tax rate for the town of Andover. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, seeing none. Town Manager, you all set?